Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning. For Monday, December 5th, I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Peach Bowl against Georgia in 26 days. The game against Michigan in 355 days.
Asterisk.
Maybe. I mean, there's still, Michigan still has to get through TCU. Ohio State still has to get through Georgia. But, they may play another the game before they play the game. But, yes, Ohio State indeed headed to the Peach Bowl, number 4 seed in the college football playoff rankings. Heading into the Peach Bowl to play Georgia in a functional home game for Georgia against the number 1 team in the nation, the defending national champions. All of this seems as if it's going to present a significant challenge to the Buckeyes. But, however, we just talked to Ryan Day and Kevin Noon. Ryan Day, I don't think Ryan Day is complaining about the uphill climb that they potentially face to try and get through that first round. He is just, this is like the Oscars. It's an honor just to be nominated. Well, they got nominated, and now the question is, what do you do with it?
Well, you want to be the man, you got to beat the man, and they're going to have to beat the man.
I've heard that somewhere before.
Yes, exactly. So you're not going to get you're not going to get an opportunity if you're not part of the 4-team field, and they are part of the 4-team field. And it's really easy to talk about the disappointment about maybe not drawing Michigan and having that assured rematch and everything else, and Georgia's this great team. Well, that's all well known. We've seen that on the field here over this 2-year run. But, Ohio State went from the greatest of depths of despair to euphoria now that they're part of the field. And now, as you said, it's what you do with that opportunity.
Yeah, Ryan Day was asked about that. What was that like Saturday night after that game? And then what was that like, when do you start to sort of turn the page towards, well, okay, you're out, but maybe you could be back in. And it sounded like they went through last week when there was nothing to practice for. There was no next team on the schedule. All they knew was, well, you're telling me there's a chance. And Ryan Day said they practiced twice last week, and the practices, especially sounds like the Thursday practice, even without a tangible next step, the intensity of the practice was college football playoff level intensity.
Right, because a Wednesday practice, a Thursday practice, that Pac-12 game had not happened yet, so you don't know that the door is open. By that point, though, you've had your Tuesday rankings reveal, you're sitting 5. So you know that, at least in certain regards, that the committee still likes your overall body of work, but you need some help, and they got that help. But you have those practices, you sit there, you go through these steps to try and get the funk out a little bit, be able to move beyond it. You have the 5 steps of grieving and everything else. Well, there was no acceptance that they weren't going to be in the college football field. If anything, it felt like this is going to happen. Something is going to break the right way, and it did.
Yeah, and this is an opportunity now. You're going into Georgia. We talked about all the challenges there. That number 1, literally having to play Georgia. Number 2, literally having to play Georgia in what will probably be a fairly hostile atmosphere. That is something that Ohio State is not really used to having to do. Ohio State generally in bowl games, Ohio State fans outnumber whoever they're playing about 70-30. That is just sort of the norm. It was a little different last year. It was about 50-50 at the Rose Bowl. Maybe a few more Utah fans than Ohio State. But this year, this could be a very hostile crowd, but that's one thing they're probably not used to. The other thing they're not used to is being underdogs. This is only the 4th time in the Ryan Day era that they have been underdogs. And, that brings with it sort of its own mindset. Sometimes they have to sort of manufacture the drama and manufacture the adversity a little bit when they're playing teams in the Big Ten. There's no manufacturing this adversity. This is very real adversity. What does that bring to this team? And maybe does that allow them to be a little more nothing to lose?
Well, certainly. They don't get to play that chip on the shoulder card all that much. They don't lose a lot of games. They certainly aren't an underdog all that often. We had an opportunity on Sunday afternoon to kind of go through the scenarios as they got announced for the bowl game, and we had to go back a ways to find some examples of them being an underdog. So you have all of that. You have the opportunity to maybe come out there and be fast and loose, but we had a little bit of a discussion on the show. Do they have anything to lose? Remember, we're only days away from where people were ready to see wholesale changes around the program. And now Ohio State is in the playoff and playing the number 1 team, and at the time of us recording this, about a touchdown underdog. If Ohio State comes out and does not play well, those drum beats will grow louder at that point. But I think, though, you can still use a lot of the we're going to go out there and, the new lease on life, we're going to give it our best shot. And I think some of that can work.
And, one of the things that could be a little bit of a change that might depend, we'll see how things play out over the next few days and weeks, but could Jackson Smith and Jigba be back? And Ryan Day was asked about this a couple different ways, and it sounds like the answer is, we'll let you know.
We've gotten that question a lot. I was like, we'll ask, he'll duck, wash, rinse, repeat, and here we are. We all have nice clean hair at this point. Wash, rinse, repeat. We'll see, but it certainly sounds as if it would have been very easy to shut it down and be like, well, we really would have liked that to happen, but it doesn't seem to be in the cards. I mean, there's no real juice for Ohio State to be forthcoming here at this point. Say, well, don't worry about preparing for him and mean it. But, I know I'll stay tuned.
Yeah, and, the question then is that, does he want to opt out? Is that he's healthy? Is that, is he comfortable playing? Is he going to be healthy enough to play? And Ryan Day said, a little from column A, from a little from column B, basically. So we should have more of an idea, hopefully, on that later on in the week, one way or the other. This is a good day for Ohio State. It's also a good day for the Big Ten, because the Big Ten gets two teams in the college football playoff. Penn State ranks number 7. And Day talked about the fact that you play this kind of a schedule in what is arguably the toughest division in football, that probably helped get them in.
Absolutely. If you didn't have that Penn State win on the road at Penn State, I mean, obviously that Notre Dame win, I think Notre Dame finished at 21, that meant a lot too, especially in this day and age where you don't necessarily have a lot of those great intersectional games. So all of that matters, the strength of the Big Ten East. Now, if Ohio State gets beat and Michigan gets upset, what does that maybe mean for the reach and the strength of the Big Ten? Well, I guess we'll have to see if that ends up coming to pass at this point. But there's only one team this year that has two teams in the college football playoff, and it's the Big Ten.
Yeah, I always go back to the start of the Big Ten is terrible narrative. That all started in 2006 when you had a number 1 versus number 2 Ohio State Michigan game, and then they both went into the college football or to the BCS and the Rose Bowl, and both kind of laid an egg. USC took care of Michigan pretty easily. Florida beat Ohio State pretty easily. So
I don't remember that game.
Yeah, that was sort of the start of all of that, and you wonder if somehow the Big Ten does win both semifinals. Boy, does that change the narrative around the Big Ten in a positive way. Kind of the opposite of how it did in 2006.
Bama got screwed.
Yeah, well, that's inarguable. If you heard Nick Saban talking about that, Georgia did not get screwed. Well, Georgia may have gotten screwed because Georgia is number 1, and they are favored by about a touchdown over Ohio State, whereas they would have been favored by substantially more than that over TCU.
Probably 2 touchdowns over TCU.
Yeah. So maybe Georgia did kind of get screwed there, but there is this is a game where sometimes there's, like last year against Utah, it was one of those is Ohio State going to take Utah seriously enough? Because it's like you can look at them and go, yeah, this is a really good, tough team, but it's not a brand name team. It's not a team with a ton of hardware in their past. None of that's an issue. And, I mean, it sounds like Ryan Day, not much question that Ryan Day has a lot of admiration for what Kirby Smart has done, and, probably wants to get his program to where Kirby Smart's program is at some point.
Certainly wants to get the defense to where Kirby Smart's defense is, because that's going to be a challenge right there. I mean, we can go through both sides of the ball. I mean, the offense, the running game that they have, they don't necessarily have that 1,500-yard rusher, but they have a lot of guys that can tote the rock and are all very good and have, little different skill sets. Obviously, you got the great tight ends, starting with Brock Bowers. You've got Stetson Bennett, the quarterback. It just goes on, and then you go on to the defensive side of the ball. And, okay, well, you can look at somebody like Jalen Carter and be like, well, that's the strength of their defense. No, they're pretty strong on all 3 levels. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But to get back to an earlier point, JSN returns. It does create some opportunities for this offense maybe to return to what we saw earlier in the year. And granted, we didn't get to see JSN earlier in the year outside of just little brief snippets, but Georgia's not going to be able to lock in on Marvin Harrison Jr. as much if Jackson Smith and Jigba has returned and is game ready. That's a big and right there. It's going to be a solid game. I think that there are a lot of Georgia fans that have come out and already are calling 30-0, 40-0. that's that's the initial bluster and everything else. I'm expecting a good game, and obviously Vegas is not calling for some sort of route with only a 6.5-point line.
Yeah, and in addition to Jackson Smith and Jigba coming back potentially, you've got, is Trevian Henderson going to be 100% or close to 100%? Is Ryan Williams going to be close to 100%? Is Mike Hall? Is Matt Jones? I mean, this is an Ohio State team that's been banged up a lot this year. And you could just, as Ryan Day was sort of talking about some of those guys, you could just sort of hear this sort of like optimism in his voice that, boy, they've had to kind of do everything on hard mode a little bit this year. It feels like they, if they are close to full strength for the first time basically all season, boy, that would make a real substantial difference with a team as talented as Ohio State is.
Right. It's really easy with recency bias to look at the Michigan game and invalidate the first 11 games of the season, or even to maybe take in the Maryland game that was a little bit wonky and say, well, that's who this team is. This isn't the team that went to Penn State and won. This isn't the team that slapped around Michigan State or whatever. This is the team, and you got to remember everybody's going through the battles, going through all the bruises and the bumps, and Ohio State was as bruised and bumped as anybody, and if they get some of these guys back, I mean, it's on.
Well, it is going to be on all month this week, all month
this month.
all month this month on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, and of course at BuckeyeHuddle.com. There's going to be a whole lot to talk about. This is going to be a heck of a football game, and this is, two teams that have only played, two of the biggest 5-8 brands in the sport have only played once in their history in a Citrus Bowl. The 1992 season, 93 Citrus Bowl, only played once before. And this one's going to have slightly more stakes than the 1993 Citrus Bowl, as Ohio State and Georgia will play in the Peach Bowl for the first opportunity to make it to the second game and the national championship against probably Michigan, maybe TCU. Probably Michigan. So quite a bit on stake. And you're going to want to be at BuckeyeHuddle.com this month, all month long. Lots of stuff to talk about. We'll have lots of shows, lots of columns, lots of great insider insight on our huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Sign up to become a member today. Like we say, give it 28 days, give it a month, give it a year, give it a month. See if you want to enjoy what we have to offer there. Tony Gerdeman, Kevin Noon, and I obviously all on team coverage. Mark Givler and Alex Gleitman on killing it on the recruiting beat as
the National Signing Day coming up in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, early signing day coming up, we're really about 2 weeks away. So this is maybe one of the busiest months of the year, despite the fact that there's not a football game for another 26 days or so. But lots of news coming around, and should be lots of interesting insight and analysis from our X's and O's guys as well, as we sort of start to preview Georgia, break down, where does Ohio State have advantages, where is Ohio State going to have challenges, can Ohio State fix the issues they've had in the past. There's going to be a lot to talk about this month. It's all going to be happening at BuckeyeHuddle.com, so sign up today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.